Welcome everybody to the early tea time live stream. I'm Hunter Vaness. I'll be your host today. We are presented by Fantasy Points as always. Thanks for joining us today. It is really nice here in Omaha, Nebraska. It's 90 degrees, which is really warm, of course. I always say there's probably like 50 days in a given year in Nebraska that we have actual like nice weather. I know 90 degrees is great, but it's still pretty hot and we've had a lot of wind. So I'm really appreciating at least the somewhat nice weather. Hopefully we can keep that up as the summer gets started, of course. I'm wearing my Boston Celtics shirt right now. I'm going to definitely watch the game as soon as the live stream is done tonight. Going to smash some showdown lineups and hopefully get a sorry, producer's giving me a boo in the comments here, but I really think we're going to tie it up tonight 2-2 and make this one a series. So looking forward to that, and hopefully, again, the Celtics can come out on top there. So let's get into the golf. That's why you're here. Today we're going to recap a little bit of last week, talk about Homa a little bit. I will look at some tournament history for the AT&T Byron Nelson. We'll do a little bit of a course preview, which you can see more in depth on Fantasy Points within my live stream, on my article on Fantasy Points. I will also go over some key stats to, maybe look at this week. We only have 1 year of data to go off of, so these key stats are important, but we'll see how relevant they are this year. We'll look at some weather and some DFS ownership as well, just kind of briefly go through both of those. We'll take a look at some of the key, the essential questions that I highlighted within my article a little bit later. And then finally, we'll take a first look at DraftKings salaries. I have not had the chance to really dive into it a whole lot today. Been a little busy at work, so you'll get my first look, my first reaction at these DraftKings salaries and see if we can find some value points out there. So let's talk about the Wells Fargo Championship a little bit. Max, the homie Homa, won his 4th career PGA Tour event on Sunday. It was really cool to see him victorious once again. I just really love the guy. I've listened to a few podcasts on him. He's talked about his struggles and how hard it was coming up on the PGA Tour in those first couple of years where he wasn't really playing too great, especially after his first win too. So really cool to see him come back over the last couple of years, and hopefully he can maybe get a major under his belt in these next few years too. He was really solid in terrible weather, and he really withheld the pressure too on Sunday, which was great to see. So love seeing Max Homa win a bit of a bigger event than what he has on his resume so far. And again, he withheld the pressure. He was 2 back going into Sunday, and he came out on top. I didn't really watch a whole lot of it, but it sounded like Keegan kind of crumbled a little bit. But how about Keegan Bradley gaining strokes putting? I mean, I talked about it in my Sunday article. We've always said, if he can just be average with the putter, he should be able to win. And he was positive with the putter this week, and he still didn't come out on top. So if he can't win, an event that's in his neck of the woods in New England where he grew up, and he gained strokes putting too, I don't really know when Keegan's going to win. So I faded him in DFS, so it wasn't really the greatest week for me on that aspect, but I just really couldn't get there at the number that he was at too. So congrats to all the Homa backers. It's really cool to see, again, him, take home another win. I think that's his 3rd in the last 18 months now, 4th total. I think that's his 2nd at Wells Fargo too. So something I want to do more often at the beginning of these live streams, instead of breaking down the event overall. I mean, you all just watched 4 days of it. You probably don't need to hear me talk too much about it from a golf standpoint, but I do want to highlight some of the top lineups and how they got to the top position that they got to. When I do this, I'll probably look at contests that I was involved in, such as the 20 max, which I'm usually playing almost every week. This is the $3 one that I'll look at. So 20 max, $3 entry. Again, that's $60 total. Most people, I don't want to say most, but you do see a lot of the people at the top, they have multiple lineups in there, of course. That's usually what I do as well. I fill out all 20 and try not to get too different throughout those 20. But I just kind of want to break down some of these winning lineups, not only for you all, but also for myself too, to see how they got there. Because again, what I love about PGA DFS is you can really be victorious through a variety of ways. You do not always have to have like the 2nd and 3rd place golfers, for example. Obviously, it does help to have the winner. We have seen tournaments where you don't have to have the winner in your lineup to be to win the GPP, for example. But most times, of course, you got to have the winner. But I'll go through some lineups here and again just kind of highlight how these people got there. So the winner in the 20 max GPP, I should have, or the $3 GPP, I should have wrote the name down here, but this player had McIlroy, Max Homa, Cameron Young, three of the pretty chalkier options on the board. That's where they started off their lineup with. And I looked at another one of his lineups too. He started off with McIlroy and Homa. I think this one finished up fourth as well. So he had two lineups in the top five. I think he took down, oh gosh, I do have it pulled up here still. So this player was Burrito Dude, and his winning lineup scored 489 points. Again, he had McIlroy, Homa, and Cameron Young, and then he finished that off with Johnny Vegas, Luke List, and Mackenzie Hughes. Now, Mackenzie Hughes was the lowest owned out of those six there. He was 1.7%. And again, I talked about it last week. If you're going to start off with a Corey Connors and a Cameron Young, for example, or a McIlroy, a Homa, a Cameron Young, like you have to have, 2 to 3 other guys that are below at least 10% ownership, if not below 5. And otherwise, you're just not going to win. There's always going to be a better lineup out there that has lower ownership with guys that have like 5 points better than you. And again, of course, finishing 10th in a GPP is awesome, but we all, of course, want to, take down that top prize there. So again, that was the winning lineup. His other lineup, it actually finished 6th place and took home $1,000. So just with those two lineups alone, he took down $8,500. On this one here, sorry, let me pull it up. Started off with McIlroy and Homa once again. Instead of Cameron Young, however, he went with Lonto Griffin, who was 4.6% owned and finished just slightly below Cameron Young. And that was the only difference within his lineup. So he basically ran a lineup train with McIlroy, Homa, Johnny Vegas, Luke List, and Mackenzie Hughes, and then just switched that other spot, which ended up being Cameron Young in the winning lineup and Lonto Griffin in his 6th place lineup. So again, the 2nd place lineup there probably has, and this, I wish there was a term out there for this. I remember talking to Rob about it first time that he had me on his show. I asked him, what do you think is the total, like the optimal total ownership for a winning lineup, for example? So if you added up all the ownership percentages of a lineup, so for example, Burrito Dude's winning lineup here had, about 80% total ownership. So McIlroy had 22, Homa was at 18, Cameron Young at 25. The other three got him to about 80% total ownership within the lineup. That's, in my opinion, pretty high compared to some of the other ones. Obviously, there's multiple ways to win here, but his other lineup was just 65% owned because he went down from Cameron Young to Lonto Griffin. So 20% ownership between those two. Obviously, that doesn't really matter when you're comparing those two lineups, but again, when you are creating your lineups, you should try to target that 65 to 80% number. 80% is still fine. You can still have 3 of the chalkiest plays in your lineup and still obviously take down a GPP, but you just need to make sure that you're not playing the Sepp Strakas, for example, or a lot of those other chalky 7K plays that just didn't do well last week, because you're not going to separate yourself, especially, of course, when they're missing the cut. But again, we always are going to be held liable with the leaderboard, right? You have to have the winner. You have to have guys who place well. It's not only about ownership, but just remember that when you're starting off your builds, especially if you're playing multiple entries, try to target that 65 to 80% ownership range. I pulled up 2 other lineups that also finished within that top 5. I think I wanted to find one that had Keegan in it. So this one went Keegan Bradley, Max Homa, Cameron Young, Joel Dahman, who fell apart on Friday, Lahiri, and then Ches Reavie. And those two were 5.8% and 1.3% owned, respectively. So a little bit different, I guess, because we have Keegan instead of Rory. But when you're, of course, building around Max Homa and Cameron Young, you really need to trying to get different elsewhere. And that's where Lahiri, Ches Reavie came in. I really wish I would have played more Lahiri. He was in my lineups, but I just didn't have enough of him to really make much of a difference. So, and I had way too much Corey Connors, so that was my issue too. Last one here, McIlroy, Homa, Johnny Vegas, Lonto Griffin, Luke List, and Mackenzie Hughes once again. So you'll see Hughes in quite a bit of the winning lineups from last week. These two lineups are under 80% and under 65% total ownership between the two, respectively. So I find myself way too many times probably getting over the 100% mark, which is way too high. Probably means I'm fitting in guys that have close to 20% ownership and maybe trying to slide in one at the end, which is still doable. But I just have been tracking or just looking at it, I guess, for the last few events. And it seems to be that 65 to 80% ownership number is usually the one that takes down those GPPs. And that still could be quite high. Not every week do we have 25% $8,000 player actually performing to expectations there, like Cameron Young did. So that's just 1 week. Of course, again, PGA DFS, it can change every single week, but it is kind of interesting just to compare and contrast these winning lineups to your own. Of course, take those mental notes. How can I improve upon this? Where did I go wrong? That's where, or what I've been trying to do, I guess, for the last year or so now. So let's get into this tournament. Let me take a little drink here. Of course, if you have any questions or comments here, you can put them in the YouTube chat. I'll do a much better job of breaking that down this time. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to get into the Byron Nelson. I will preview the golf data page from the 2021 Byron Nelson, which is a really great resource. Some of you that have been using golf data for a long time now are probably looking like, duh, of course, why wouldn't you show this? But if you haven't, used this resource before, I highly encourage it. There's so much free information out there. If you don't use Fantasy National, I really think Data Golf, I always mix those two. Data Golf is a great resource to use. So again, this is the 2021 page from Data Golf for the Byron Nelson. Again, it's going to be played at TPC Craig Ranch. Just a brief history lesson here on the Byron Nelson Classic, as it used to be called. It began in 1944 when Byron Nelson himself actually won what was called the Texas Victory Open. It was eventually renamed the Byron Nelson Golf Classic in 1968, and it had a variety of sponsors throughout the last 20 to 30 years. We've had Verizon, Electronic Data Systems, HP or Hewlett Packard, and now AT&T, of course, as well, which they've had for quite a while now. It has moved around quite a bit too. It was played at Four Seasons. I forgot the name of the course it was at before TPC Craig Ranch, but it was just there for a year. I believe TPC Craig Ranch is slated to have this for the next 4 years, if I remember correctly. So we won't have to jump around too much with this event now that we've finally found at least a temporary home. Last year, again, it was moved to TPC Craig Ranch, which is found in McKinney, Texas. It's just outside of Dallas. It has held some Korn Ferry Tour events in 2008 and 2012. They were the season-ending Korn Ferry Tour events. It was called the Nationwide Tour before Korn Ferry Tour. Mark Leishman, Luke List, James Hahn, that's a list of golfers who did pretty well in those events a long time ago that are slated to tee it up this week. Not really something that we're going to go off of course, if you want to play James Hahn, because he did really well in a 2012 Korn Ferry Tour event that was, again, played 10 years ago, and the course has changed quite a bit since then. You're welcome to do so, but I just think it's kind of a fun stat to talk about. And again, of course, it's just been played here 1 year, so that's where a lot of the data that I'm looking at here, you can see a lot of this here, such as the scoring average to par. So the average round is about 2.5 strokes under par, which is really low compared to the tour average. This is definitely going to be a birdie fest, in my opinion. We'll see where the wind goes, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. A bunch of other stats here. This course yardage is a little bit off. It's actually 7,468 yards. Excuse me. The driving accuracy is up quite a bit. It's pretty easy to hit the fairways. Average fairway width is 40.3 feet, I believe, is the measurement for that. Wide fairways as well. So again, lots of good information here. I won't talk about every single part here. We'll kind of talk about them in a little more depth as we get through the stats. But again, just a great resource to go off of there at Data Golf. So some tournament history. So K.H. Lee won last year. He started off with 265s, I believe Jordan Spieth was actually he tied for the first round leader. I don't have the name of the other guy in front of me, but so KH Lee wasn't the first round leader like we see him at these TPC courses from time to time, but he did come out with a blistering 65 on Friday as well, and he just didn't let up on the weekend. He shot a 66 and a 67 to get all the way down to minus 25 or 25 under par. So really solid out of KH Lee. That was his first PGA Tour victory. It also got him into the PGA Championship, which was held the following week. This event is typically, I don't have the exact years, but it's typically held before the PGA Championship or before a major. So there's usually, of course, 4 majors. There's always 4 events that come before those. I'll talk about that a little bit later. They do tend to be a little bit different. We've seen some different results on these events that, again, come before a major championship. KH Lee finished second in strokes gained approach last year and third in strokes gained tee to green, right behind Will Zalatoris in approach and behind him in tee to green and Sam Burns when he finished third there. But the difference between him and those two was his putter. Zalatoris had a terrible week putting. I can find him down below here. He finished T17. Oh gosh, I have the wrong stats pulled up. Let's see. Pull up strokes gained. So he finished T17, but he lost over a stroke putting per round there, ranking nearly dead at the end of the field there for those that made the cut, or dead last there. So that was one of the first few events that we really noticed Zalatoris is not a great putter, again, from last year. We'll talk about him more, in a little bit, of course. Again, the difference for KH Lee was his putter. He gained over 4 strokes on the putting greens on these bent grass greens. His win last year really cemented his nickname, like I said in my article, the TPC Lee or Mr. TPC. I don't know if we have an official name for that, but I've definitely heard a lot floated around before. And I'm not the starter of those nicknames, so I can't take credit, but he's definitely known as the guy who plays well on these TPC courses. So we'll see if he can continue that this year as he tries to defend his title. So there's not a whole lot of data to go off of course, not a whole lot of course history. So actually these last 3 events now have been played on new courses or newer courses such as Vidanta or the one last week, TPC Potomac, that again we don't have much data off of, right? So there's not a lot of course history to write up as well. And I'll be honest, I'm a bit of a course history guy, especially when looking for value plays, guys who haven't been playing great over the last few events, but they're going to a course that they like really well, and maybe they'll be overlooked a little bit. So again, we can't really look at course history too much, but here's a look at the top 10 from last year. Again, KH Lee was minus 25. He finished first. Sam Burns finished second. Let me get the chat pulled up there. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Tied for third, we had Scott Stallings at 21 under par, Daniel Berger, Charles Schwartzel, and Patton Kazire, who plays well on these Texas courses. Tied for seventh, we had Troy Merritt and Joseph Bromlett at 19 under par. Seamus Power, Doc Redman, Jordan Spieth, and Jonathan Vegas all finished for tie for ninth, 18 under par. So I guess that's top 12, but they all finished inside that top 10. So again, we're looking at this list. There's a lot to go off of, I guess. There's not a major stat category that pops out to me as far as how, these guys' strengths, I guess. I talked about it in my article. There's bombers off the tee, such as Sam Burns, of course, Joseph Bromlett, Johnny Vegas. Again, there's guys who have distance, right? Of course, they have their accuracy to them a little bit, maybe not with Bromlett, but they can really bomb it off the tee. But we also see accurate hitters here too, such as Daniel Berger, Doc Redman, who I think was actually first in fairways gained that week, and Troy Merritt too, who's an accurate hitter off the tee. So off the tee is going to be important. I'm looking more at ball striking, I guess, just who's good at getting it to the green in general, or who's the best on those first couple of shots off the tee and on approach too. So approach was the most important category, and we can look at the golf data page here as well. I love flipping between the values, so that shows how many strokes they gained around, as well as their ranks throughout the entire field. And if you look at this approach stat and you compare it to how everyone finished, of course, you'll see a lot of guys inside the top 10, of course, that finished inside the top 10 overall. And you'll see a lot of guys in the top 20 here as well that finished inside the top 20 as well. So you'll get your occasional, purple shades here, such as Scott Stallings, who led the field in putting, right? Harry English, who was basically perfect in every other stat outside of approach. Kadira, Snedeker, Matt Kuchar, who are just great putters in general. So I think approach is definitely going to be the most important stat this week. That's not any breaking news by any means, especially for these birdie fests. But again, if you just look at the stats and how everyone ended up, most of the players inside the top 20 on approach landed inside of the top 20 in the overall, leaderboard too. So, and you can see that with KH Lee too. The main thing that separated him though was his putter. His putter got hot. So, Patton Kizzire looked like he had good putting, good approach play too, but he was just terrible off the tee, terrible around the greens too. So, I mean, when you're that close, you got to be pretty perfect in those other two areas. You can't have major weaknesses too. But I think he was a pretty solid value that week, Kizzire. So he'll come up quite a bit this week too on shows, and I'm sure he'll be a decently popular play on DFS. So again, this is a small sample size, so I don't encourage anyone to bank their entire card or their DFS plays off of this alone. Again, it's just 1 year, so things can certainly change. There's going to be wind this week. I don't think there was a lot of wind last week. Or last year, excuse me. I think it was relatively calm. There was also a lot of rain before the event. I don't think there's going to be any rain this week. It's going to be relatively dry. It's been really dry in the Midwest. I'm sure Texas is different than Nebraska, of course, but it's been dry and windy. So I do think wind will play somewhat of an impact this week. We'll see how much really, affects players, I guess. So I just don't think we're going to see minus 25 under par. And KH Lee literally was basically perfect, in every stat category. You can see it there, top 25 and everything here, all those major stat categories that we always talk about. And he got to minus 25, and that was in near perfect weather conditions. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of a minus 20, maybe, depending if someone gets hot with the putter, of course, too. But I don't know if we're going to get to that minus 25 number again. KH Lee was near perfect, and so was the weather, too. So don't, again, base your entire card off of the top 10 from last year because it's just a small sample size. They're likely going to have inflated DFS ownership too because that's just what people tend to do. All right, so the last 10 winners, or not, I'll just go last 6 here, or 5, sorry. That's what I have written down. So last 5 winners are going to be KH Lee in 2021. 2020 was actually canceled due to the pandemic, of course. Sung Kang won in 2019. That was his first PGA Tour victory as well. So 2 South Koreans have won the last 2 events here. They also won their first PGA Tour event. So I believe there is a newer South Korean player in this event as well. We'll have to target him just off of that alone, right? Kidding. 2018 was won by Aaron Wise. That was his one and only PGA Tour event. He hit minus 23, but after KH Lee, all these were played on a different golf course, so we can't go off of them too much. We can't just plug in Billy Horschel here, who won in 2017. I don't think he's in the field this week, but again, he won on a different golf course in 2017, and Sergio won in 2016. He hit 15 under par. So yes, you can go off of this a little bit because they are playing well in Texas, right? It's a Texas area. It's Texas style of golf. So I don't think they are in the field this week, though. Horschel and Garcia. I could be wrong. I'll have to double check as we go through the salaries. So TPC Craig Ranch. Let's get into some of the specifics here, and I'll keep this up, and we'll look at some of the main stuff within these main stats, such as the approach shot distribution, and then some correlations between stats. You can see those there a little bit too. So this was designed by, the course TPC Craig Ranch was designed by Tom Weiskopf. I think I'm getting that right. And it opened up in 2004. He also redesigned TPC Scottsdale in 2015, which is home of the Waste Management Open, and the North Course at Torrey Pines in 2016. So we have seen some courses from him. This is the main one that he's designed that we have on the PGA Tour. I'm not really looking at those other two too much because this one was, it's been around for quite a while. I don't know if he's changed too much of his designs within those 12 years, but you never know. Some of the main features of the course are going to be the rolling hills throughout the property, as well as what's called Rolette Creek, which is a little stream that runs through 14 of the 18 holes. It comes into play on 13 of the holes there. The par 72 course measures over 7,400 yards long, and it features Zoysia fairways. I do have a quote on Zoysia fairways here. It comes from Will Zalatoris. This is coming from last year. He says that we don't play a lot of Zoysia grass fairways on the tour. That means that you can aim at the flag more and around the greens. He says you can spin the ears off the golf ball more than you can when you play on those grainy Bermuda fairways, is what he calls it as well. So sounds like you can really, stripe those pins here with these nice, grass fairways here again with Zoysia grass. So got to make sure I get that right. So just another thing to add to our Birdie Fest narrative, I guess, just going off of that last year as well. Again, we don't see them on the tour too much, so you can maybe emphasize players that play on these kind of greens a little bit, or these kind of fairways a little bit more, such as Zalatoris. He plays this course quite a bit. He's mentioned in the past too. So when we get to the greens, though, players will see bent grass greens on approach shots, and they have a reading of 11.5 on the stimp meter. Other random points here, we have 83 sand bunkers throughout the course. The rough is going to be 2.5 inches long of Bermuda grass, much, an inch less than last week. So hopefully we don't see, as much trouble if you miss the fairway, of course. You were not seeing many long shots out of those, out of the long rough last week on that second shot. So really crucial to hit the fairway last week. I think it's going to be much easier to hit the fairway this week, and the rough isn't as penalizing either. So again, a couple of things that will boost that Birdie Fest narrative. Some birdie holes here. There's quite a few. We got 5, 6, 9, 12, 14, and 18. The two most difficult holes on the course are going to be holes 13 and 16. The historic cut line, so we've only had 1 year, right? So it was -5 last year, which is pretty low. So look for your golfers to hit that -2, -3 in the first couple days, or in the first day, just to maybe feel safe about it. But of course, anything is possible. We saw Aaron Rye drop from, first on Thursday, and he missed the cut on Friday. And that was a much different course, of course. So I don't expect to see as much carnage this week, but that's one of those things, anything can happen on Friday. That's why we love this game, but it also, those cut sweats can also drive us crazy sometimes too. Some comp courses here: TPC Southwind, TPC Summerlin, PGA West, TPC Twin Cities, the Detroit Golf Club. Those are places that usually see quite a few birdies as well. And those are typically, second shot golf courses where approach is the most important stat. I broke down a lot of the stats for some of the holes at TPC Craig Ranch within the event and course preview. So if you want to look into that, you're definitely welcome to do so, or I invite you to do so, actually. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for a Fantasy Points PGA subscription. Use that promo code VANESS22 to get a good discount on that. Got a lot of good stuff coming up next week for the PGA Championship. But for the holes, as far as TPC Craig goes, just a brief Cliff Notes version of it here. Tough, long par threes. 3 of them measure over 210 yards, which is brutal. I would be terrible on those. So mixed bag of par fours. There's some easy, 1.5 of them are drivable. One of them is definitely drivable at 330 yards. The other one's 360. So I'm sure we'll get some shots that are relatively close to the green. And then some of them are really hard too. So we'll kind of see how those par fours impact the field this week. And we have some really, really easy par fives. There's some of the easiest par fives on the tour, I believe. They're birdied at a 28 to 30% clip. Some of them are birdied over 40%. So, if you're scoring par, or even worse, a bogey on those par fives, you are really, really giving up shots to the field there. Again, feel free to read more into that in the event and course preview on Fantasy Points, break down what some of those par threes look like. Some key stats that I'm going to be looking at this week. There are 6 main ones that I'll go over. Check out Pat James' stat article, his stat breakdown. That's coming out later on Fantasy Points. I'm not sure if it is out quite yet. Then you'll have to let me know on that one. But yeah, again, feel free to. Yeah, it is up. Okay, cool. I highly encourage you all to again look at that because he really breaks down the stats much deeper than what I do within my course preview. Talks about why they're important as well as who is trending upward within those stats and who is kind of falling down the page or seeing some red within some of those stats. So just wanted to hype up that. I do read that each and every week. So some key stats here. First one's going to be strokes gained, ball striking. Like I said, this is definitely a second shot golf course, but I still want guys who can put it in place off the tee and who are the best in those first two shots. So both off the tee and of course on approach, which is that ball striking stat. So here are the best ball strikers within the field. We have Will Zalatoris coming in number one. He's going to pop in a lot of different stats, especially when it is a second shot golf course. Zalatoris is going to be there. I expect him to be the highest owned option in DFS. I did see his price. It's not anything that's gonna steer people away. So Justin Thomas is number two in ball striking. Aaron Wise number three, again the 2018 winner of this event. Luke List is number four, who made the cut last week. Looked pretty solid in my opinion after a string of pretty terrible results. And then Hideki Matsuyama comes in at fifth, who is basically green in every stat category across the board. He's not a great putter, of course, but he really doesn't have many weaknesses, which not many players within the field can say. If you look at the approach data or the approach shot distribution chart here on golf data, this is really where you'll see why we, people who look at this a lot, I guess, why we always bring up these proximity numbers, because it just shows you which, approach shots are the most common on this course. So for example, 200 to 25 or 200 to 225, 225 to 250, 250 plus, these are all, more than the tour average. So players are going to be hitting from this distance on their approach shot almost twice as much than normal courses. So we're definitely going to see those long irons coming out this week, which we've seen actually the last few weeks. At Vidanta, it was a long course. Last week at Wells Fargo, at Potomac, it was a pretty long course as well. Again, that had the long irons pulled out after the driver. So we'll see that again this week too, and we'll look at that stat here very shortly. The top, so over 34% of all approach shots from last year came from over 200 plus yards, which in total is about 12% higher than the tour average. If we add all of those three higher categories here, 200 all the way up to 250, if we add all three of those together, it's about 12% more than the tour average. So I do think we want to weigh into that a little bit. So these are the players who get it closest to the pin from long distance. We have Austin Smotherman, Will Zalatoris, Kurt Kitayama, who's been playing really well recently. Hideki Matsuyama comes up once again, and Aaron Rai. Of course, your best ball strikers are likely going to do well in this category as well. I like proximity. I think it's a fun stat to look at, but I don't think it's the tell-all, be-all. I'm definitely going to weigh it in this week because it's important to see, again, this stat because it's more important than other courses, but it's essentially saying who hits it closest to the pin. Well, these guys are so good. It could just be 1 to 2 feet difference. So definitely make sure that you're factoring in putting just a little bit. Will Zalatoris, Austin Smotherman can obviously hit it really well from deep, but if they are 3-putting or 2 to 3 putting every time, it's probably not going to do too well in the overall strokes gain category, right? So make sure you're factoring in all stats when you're doing this. I'm not just going to smash Austin Smotherman this week because he ranks well in this one stat. I do want to make sure that these players have somewhat of the complete package. And Aaron Rai is going to be fifth there. Talked about him a little bit earlier. He did well on Thursday, had a terrible Friday on last week. So here's the putters here. TPC Craig Ranch will present golfers with bent grass greens with a Stimpmeter of 11.5. Looking at all the courses so far this year that I've written down for Stimpmeters, 11.5 is about the average actually. So about average green speed, a little bit faster than the past Palm that we saw a couple weeks ago, a little bit slower than what we saw last week at Wells Fargo. Let's take a look at who is the best putters on the bent grass greens. We're going to have Jason Kokrak coming in first, Brant Snedeker second, Alex Norton third, Bo Hostler 4th, and Dustin Johnson is going to be 5th here. All right. 2 more stats. Next is birdie or better percentage. Players scored birdie or better on nearly 25% of all the holes at TPC Craig Ranch last year. So this is certainly a birdie fest rather than a bogey avoidance type of course like last week at Wells Fargo, right? These are some of the best scorers in the field this week. Over the last 24 rounds, we have Scotty Scheffler, who's been dominant in the last few months. Kurt Kitayama, number 2. Joaquin Niemann, number 3. Hideki Matsuyama, number 4. He's popping once again. And Adam Hadwin coming in 5th. Gonna have to write down this Hideki, all these stats with Hideki. He's really popping up quite a bit. I wonder what his ownership will be. Last thing here, strokes gained par 5, excuse me. Everyone inside the top, 7 of the top 10 finishers finished inside the top 10 in strokes gained on par 5s from last year, and the other 3 out of those 7 were still positive in the category. So with these par 5s being the easiest, on the course, right, the most birdied out of all the holes, you've got to take advantage of these. You've got to score on all 4 of them. You really do. Otherwise, you are likely giving up a stroke or 2 to the field. And that's what KH Lee did last year. He was near the top of the field in strokes gained on par 5s. So top 5 players within this stat category, we have Johnny Vegas, Keith Mitchell, Scotty Scheffler, Matthias Schwab, and Justin Thomas, who I haven't brought up yet within these stats. So interested to see where his mindset is this week. I'll talk about it here in a second. I'm not really sure how everyone's going to react to having the PGA Championship coming up here next week and where everyone's mindset is. I lied. We have one more stat here. So I do think we're going to see moderate wind all 4 days. I've been talking about it a little bit here. We'll look at the weather more carefully in a second, but here's a look at who plays the best in windy conditions. So I took the Fantasy National Golf Model. I put on the moderate wind. I put the windy AF stat on there, and these are the top 10 players in those windy conditions. So we have JT, number 1. There he is. Justin Thomas. We have Joaquin Niemann, number 2. Adam Scott, number 3. Will Zalatoris, 4. Mark Leishman, 5. Matthew Wolff, 6. Maverick McNeely, 7. Sam Burns, Xander Schauffele, and Alex Noren coming in number 10. So those are guys that play well in wind. I don't think it's going to be ridiculous this week, but we'll definitely have to monitor it by Wednesday. See if we can maybe get a tee time stack too. I think that's more of a showdown thing for me, at least most times, but we'll see what we have going on Wednesday. Make sure that you check out that Fantasy Points Discord. I really want us to start talking about weather a little bit more on Wednesday. I'll have to start it up this week. So the weather, McKinney, Texas, looks like we'll have pretty high temperatures. It's going to be in the 80s and 90s all week long with a partial cloud cover each day. However, again, winds are forecasted to be 10 to 20 miles per hour. It's about like 13 one day, 16 the next day, 18. And that's obviously going to fluctuate. It's probably different now than when I checked earlier this morning. So you never really know, of course. I have another quote from Will Zalatoris. He said it all really depends on the wind here on how, the winning or what the winning score will be, right? So he says, and this is his quote here, it says, "It really all depends on the wind. If it blows, it can be tough. I was playing in Q School one year and shot a 72, which is even par. And he said he moved up 16 spots. So, and that's probably typical of most courses with wind, right? But again, if it's really windy, I don't think we're going to see that minus 25 under par or even really 20 under par. We'll see how much it impacts it by Thursday, of course. So yeah, again, be on the lookout for that. I'll try and tweet something out potentially. Check the Fantasy Points Discord. Make sure that you're subbed, of course, that you can get into that. Talk about any wind advantages that we might see. Let me pull up the ownership here, and here's a perfect time to talk about the chat here. If you have any questions on really anything, I love talking about ownership. I always wanted to know where ownership lies, really at any point. So if you have any guys that you're really thinking about targeting right now, you want to know where their ownership is standing right now on Monday. Obviously, it's very, very early, of course, but usually these popular plays tend to be pretty popular throughout the week unless some injury, pops up or something like that. So Again, if you have any questions about specific guys, let me know. So the highest owned as of Monday, it's going to be Sam Burns, Will Zalatoris, Johnny Vegas, Justin Thomas, Joaquin Neiman, Aaron Wise, Maverick McNeely, Scotty Scheffler, and Adam Hadwin. So I'd say that's a decent group there. You see a lot of top names there, of course, with JT, Scotty Scheffler. The value of the chalk value of the week's probably going to be Aaron Wise, Johnny Vegas, McNeely. I wasn't really expecting that. Looks like Kurt Kitayama is also getting some ownership too. The secret is definitely out of the bag on him as he's been playing well over the last couple of weeks. Patton Kizzire is also going to be pretty chalky at 7,100. I've seen some Keith Mitchell buzz this week already on Twitter. He's at 7,500 on DraftKings. He's also going to be inside that. Looks like top 10, top 15 highest owned as of now. Again, of course, things can change. Something could happen, of course, too. So that is the early outlook for DFS, sakes, of course. If you have any questions throughout the week, let us at Fantasy Points know. Of course, be sure to check out the Fantasy Points ownership projections as well. Excuse me. All right, so some essential questions this week, and then we will dive into the field a little bit more. Let me take a quick drink. If you have any questions, I keep saying that again, I really want to get that chat going. Hit up that YouTube chat. Love to hear your thoughts on these two essential questions that I highlighted within my article. So first and foremost, let's talk about some Texas natives that we can potentially target this week. I tried to write down, I know I don't have everyone here, but these are some guys that have either grown up in Texas, went to college in Texas, or currently reside in Texas or even near Dallas that we can potentially target. It's something that I, typically tend to do, especially if they are low owned. I think it's a great way to maybe separate yourself from the field a little bit, especially with these guys potentially being comfortable in their home state. Maybe they're even, best case scenario, sleeping in their own bed every single night. They're just much more comfortable, which is, in my opinion, pretty important in golf. If you're not in the right mindset, you are not going to do well out there. So first off, we got to start off with Jordan Spieth, right? He's kind of the poster boy for Texas golf. He was born in Dallas. He went to the University of Texas as well. He's also won, I believe, 2 events in Texas. Most recently was the Houston Open last year. I think I have that event right. So Spieth's probably going to get some. Well, let's look at his ownership right now. Again, I'm kind of looking at salaries for the very first time as well. Spieth is going to be $10,100. Looks like his ownership's around 12% right now, so not too terrible. You're going to have to, there's going to be someone who's low owned up top there. You can't play everybody, of course, too. So it looks like he's going to be one of the pivots. Dustin Johnson, Xander Schauffele as well. We'll look at the field a little bit deeper here in a second. Scotty Scheffler, just a few months off of his match play win in Austin, Texas. Also a few events off of his win at Augusta for the Masters. This is the first time that we'll see him since the match play. So he hasn't actually played, I don't think he's played a stroke play event since his win at Augusta. So interesting to see, what the field does with this week. Interesting to see what he does coming off of his Masters win. I know he played in the team event at Zurich, but I do like Scheffler this week at $10,900. That is really, really low compared to what I was thinking, especially for what Jon Rahm and McIlroy have been the last 2 weeks. Over 11,000. Actually, McIlroy, I think, was 11.5 last week, 11.4. So not sure why the top golfer in the world, the Master champion, playing in his home state is, $400 or $500 less than that. So I do think that's a great price for him. I definitely think we'll have to take advantage of that. A couple others. So Amarillo, native. I think I have that right. That's in Texas there. I got to work on my pronunciation. So Ryan Palmer, he's got some great results in his home state too. He's also said in the past that he owns the course record at TPC Craig Ranch with a 61, I believe. So he went to North Texas. He finished runner-up in 2011 to Keegan Bradley. He was T4 last year, or T14. Let me pull that up. I think I wrote that wrong. So let's do it's on the fly here. So Ryan Palmer actually finished T47, not T4. Sorry, I wrote that down. So T47, he had a terrible Sunday, actually. I think he shot even on Sunday, or worse. I got it pulled up here, +3 on Sunday. So he was sitting 14 under going into the last round. I'm sure he went down quite a bit on that final round. But again, he went to North Texas. He's got great results here. I love playing Ryan Palmer on Texas courses. Will Zalatoris grew up in Dallas. He's also stated that he's played this course close to 100 times, whether just in junior golf or on the Q school or just literally playing here because he lives close by. He's got some great results here. He also led the field in approach and tee to green last year. Mentioned it earlier. He just could not make a putt. So we've seen a little progress from him. He's definitely not a good putter by any means, but he's going to be chalk. He's probably going to be one of the highest owned players this week, if not for Sam Burns. I can't really tell you not to play him, though. Even in a birdie fest, if he knows this course, there's no reason why he can't get to 20 under par. If the wind is blowing, that actually makes me want to play him more. I think he'll play well just due to his ball striking. So Austin Smotherman is a current resident of Dallas. He also went to SMU with Harry Higgs, who also lives in Dallas, went to SMU. They were teammates with Bryson DeChambeau. Tom Hoagie went to TCU, although he didn't grow up here. He did go to college in Texas. Bo Hostler went to the University of Texas. He lives in Austin right now. He had a top 5 at the Valero Texas Open, but he's had 2 terrible events since then. I'm willing to forgive that a little bit, actually. I think Bo Hostler is going to be my sneaky play of the week. I don't know how sneaky that'll actually be, but I just don't think people are going to go back to him after seeing him completely fall apart on what was a very tough golf course last week at the Wells Fargo. So I'm willing to forgive that a little bit. RBC Heritage, kind of willing to forgive that too, just because that's a pretty tough golf course too. He goes back to Texas, where he's from, had a great result here just a few events ago at the Valero Open. I don't see any reason why not to go back to him. I guess his results last week, but 3% owned, 6,600 on DraftKings. I do like Bo Hostler, again, playing in his home state. Dylan Fratelli went to the University of Texas. He finished 8th at Valero as well. So that's just a pair of golfers there. Let's see what Fratelli's price tag is right now. He's coming in at 7,300, looking like about 3% owned as well. So pretty low. Again, this can always change too. So we'll have to see where that shakes out by Wednesday. Brooke Koepka, these are some golfers that have done well here, actually. Brooks Koepka was runner-up here in 2016 on a different golf course, but he's got some good results here in Texas. Taylor Gooch has some good results in Texas as well. He went to Oklahoma State. We'll have to see where he maybe lines up on the odds board next week when he's playing at Southern Hills in Tulsa, not too far away from Oklahoma State. Carlos Ortiz won the Houston Open. He's got some good results in Texas too. Patton Kizzire, top 10 last year. And Rory Sabatini, I believe he is in the field too. He's also got some decent results on these Texas courses. So that's one narrative that I'm definitely playing into this week. These Texas, golfers. I just tend to do that quite a bit. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it's not always the greatest, but you just kind of have to play it week to week, of course. My other essential question here, and this is where I'll kind of wrap things up here, and we'll do a deep dive or a brief dive of the field and open it up to questions as well. My other question here is, should we target players who are playing in next week's, major championship at the PGA championship, at Southern Hills, or should we, fade them entirely? This is a classic narrative that gets played in these 4 events that are before a major. How motivated are these players? Are they trying to just, again, I wrote about it, just trying to get a tune-up, in this week in preparation for the event next week that's not too far away, in Oklahoma? Or are they going out there trying to win? As golf fans, of course, we want to believe that all of them are going out there to win, right? And just the competitive spirit, right? But I think if we actually asked every single one of them, I can't imagine all of them would say, yeah, I'm super motivated to go out here and win the AT&T Byron Nelson, classic or whatever. So, of course, again, everyone wants to win, but let's say that you are, a Justin Thomas, for example, and you have an afternoon tee time and you haven't even teed off yet. And For example, let's pull a random name. Brandon Haggy shoots a 8 to 9 under par, and you haven't even teed off yet, and you're looking at that like, wow. I got quite a bit to go. Of course, these guys are professionals, right? But if you start 1 or 2 over par and you're already 10 back of guys who teed it off in the AM or in the morning there, it's hard to stay as dialed in, I would assume, after 3 to 4 holes that you're not playing your best. So again, we say tune up. I'm not really sure. Of course, we can obviously see guys go out there and win. It would not surprise me at all one bit to see Scotty Scheffler, be victorious once again this week. But I have a list of over the last 5 years, a list of winners who have came in events before a major championship. So let's start off, with the most recent event here, the Valero Texas Open, which was right before the Masters, which was won by J.J. Spaun in 2022, of course. So he won the Valero Texas Open. He earned that automatic bid to the Masters. And that's really the motivation for this, right, is getting that automatic invitation or automatic bid, not just to this major, PGA Championship, but I believe you get one to every major over the next few years, too. And it really just obviously sets up your career. But this is just that small extra incentive of, man, I got a major championship next week that I'm not in the field for right now. That's just that small incentive why KH Lee, right, who won last year at the Byron Nelson, gives them that little motivation to go out there and win. So a few other ones for, in the last few years, John Deere Classic came before the British Open. Lucas Glover won that one in 2021. Garrick Higo won the Palmetto Championship, which came before the U.S. Open last year. KH Lee won the Byron Nelson before the PGA Championship. Jordan Spieth won the Valero Texas Open, so that's a big name, right? That's definitely one of the few here. Carlos Ortiz won the Houston Open before the Masters in 2020. Stuart Sink won the Safeway Open before the U.S. Open in 2020. Justin Thomas won the WGC FedEx St. Jude before the PGA Championship. So that's another big name too, right? We do have two there, Spieth and Justin Thomas. However, we get to 2019, Dylan Fratelli won the John Deere Classic before the Open. Sung Kang won the Byron Nelson before the PGA. Corey Connors won the Valero Texas Open before he was Chalk Corey Connors. I think he was 250 to 1 to win that event. That was before the PGA. Before the Masters, my bad. Rory McIlroy won before the U.S. Open. He won the Canadian Open. A few others here. Michael Kim won. Dustin Johnson won. Ian Poulter won. So it's kind of a mixed bag, right? We do see some of these top names, of course, but they're winning every event, right? It's not rare that we see Rory McIlroy, coming up in a list of wins, right? But KH Lee, Higo, Glover, Spaun, Fratelli, Sung Kang, Michael Kim. These are guys that don't have many other wins under their belt that, again, got their first career PGA, or not first career, but one of their first victories, right? Or maybe their only victory in an event before a major. So, again, not telling you what to do, telling you what I'm probably going to do likely. I'm going to center probably a lot of my card around some long shots. Hopefully we get a little lucky this week. Just some guys that aren't really on, the PGA championship radar next week, are not in the field, right? That, again, have that extra incentive to win. So I'll go through these really quick. If you have any questions on guys that you are looking into, we can pull up their stats as we round out the show here today. But 3 guys that I wrote up about, all 3 of them are currently not in the PGA Championship. Johnny Vegas is going to be one of them. He's a great ball striker overall. He's been trending upward. He was positive in every stat category last year at TPC Craig Ranch in his 9th place finish. He ranks 1st in strokes gained par 5s, 6th in approach, 15th in ball striking, 6th in birdies or better, and 10th in overall strokes gained within this field. So really great course fit as far as stats go. Like I said, he's not currently in the PGA Championship, and he is a University of Texas alum. So he is used to playing, this Texas golf. So he's really, hitting that trifecta that I'm looking for this week. Great course fit, Texas resident or Texas alum, right? Went to University of Texas, and not in the next week, or not in the major next week, right? So really motivated to go out there and play well, if not, win the event, of course. So He's 12 of 15 in his last, or 12 of 15 for mid cuts in his last 15. 27th, 4th, 18th, and 15th in his last 4 events. So he's really playing well in general. And again, he just fits this course. He's a great ball striker. I think bent grass is one of his better surfaces. I'll have to double check that, of course. But yeah, do like Johnny Vegas quite a bit. Aaron Wise, 2018 winner of the Byron Nelson Classic. Was a different course, of course, but he has a 21st and a 6th in his last 2 starts. Really great course fit here, too. 3rd in ball striking, 6th in approach, 12th in proximity from 200 plus yards. I know it's kind of like an overplayed thing, playing Aaron Wise. I feel like he gets talked about every single week, but I like playing him on these courses that just kind of fit him a little bit better instead of, just playing chalk Aaron Wise just for the heck of it. But he's been playing well. He had kind of a rough stretch earlier in the spring, but he got a couple of good results here, 21st and 6th in his last 2 starts. Bent grass is his best putting surface, or I guess, you can say the one that he sucks the least on because he's not a great putter, but he's not listed in the PGA Championship field. He doesn't have a win in the last few years. He's not in the field next week, so looking to see if he can get an invite by winning this week. Again, good course fit, so I'm definitely for that. And then finally, Kurt Kitayama, great players, not teeing it up next week at PGA Championship. I don't know about great player, but he's playing great recently, I guess, and that's what I'm really looking for here. He was 1 stroke away from tying Rahm at the Mexico Open, and he finished T15 at a completely different course up in Maryland last week for the Wells Fargo Championship. So I said his name twice earlier when I was mentioning stats. He's grades, inside the top 5 in proximity from 200 plus and birdie or better percentage within the last 24 rounds. He's 3rd in approach over the last 24 rounds too. I said earlier, the secret's out on him though. You're not getting him at that 2 to 3% ownership that we saw at the Mexico Open. I think it was a little bit higher last week, but if you would have told me this a month ago that he is going to be 10% owned, I would have called you crazy, but there is some stats that kind of back that up. I think his odds are pretty juicy again for a long shot bet. I don't know if I'm going to get there in DFS because playing, these high-owned guys that don't have a long-term history of success usually does not work out in your favor, but I don't mind him again for a long shot bet. I'll definitely look to have him on my card. All right, that is what I got here today for the early tee time live stream. Are there any questions here? I'm pulling them up on YouTube. I will keep it open here for a little bit if you want to throw any last second comments in here. Some guys that I'm targeting, I kind of talked about them here a little bit. Maybe some, I don't know. I just want to talk about Luke List a little bit, I guess. He played pretty well last week. And Matthew Wolff, too. 2 great ball strikers that have been pretty rough, since January, really, who had decent results last week. So let's see where they're sitting right now. Wolff is about 5% owned, but I could really see that getting up as the week goes on, of course. And then Luke List is 7,300. He is about 9.4%. So I kind of like those two as sneakier plays. I mean, Luke List, Matthew Wolff are 1,000 times better than Kurt Kitayama as a long-term golfer, right? But Kitayama's just been having, a better couple of weeks. I always say with guys like Gary Woodland or Ricky Fowler or Matt Wolff, right? I got to see something out of them before I blindly bet on them every week. Because I think you can honestly go crazy by playing some of these guys every week, just hoping that you can find the week that they turn it around. I try not to do that because I just think, again, you can drive yourself crazy trying to play an Aaron Wise, right? Every single week, hoping that it turns out for him. But I just think that this is a better week for him, a better course setup. I kind of like him in, I don't know about desert golf, but this, more humid weather. He's from Vegas. He plays a lot in Vegas. So not, the same as Texas, of course, but yeah, I kind of like Wise a little bit. So looks like we don't have any questions. So if you have any other questions as the week goes on, you can hit me up on Twitter at Huntman10. I will be posting my cheat sheet on Wednesday, as I always do. You can find that on my Twitter page and on my website. Be sure that you check fantasy points throughout the week. Check out the ownership projections. Check out the Discord, of course. There's some great content coming from the rest of the team as well. And I will see you all next week for the PGA Championship. Really looking forward to diving into Southern Hills. I'm probably going to start that research tonight because I am kind of done with the course here, of course, for the Byron Nelson. So I'm really looking forward to the major next week at Southern Hills. You'll have a pretty in-depth breakdown from me next week. So that does it for me. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Huntman10, and I will see you all next week. Good luck, everybody.